The Big 12 is done giving fuel to the fire of the anti-Big 12 narratives in the media and your Big 12 haters, your Paul Feinbaums of the world. The Big 12 is not going to just hand them on a silver platter a way to bring the league down narratively. But is this a legitimately good move? Is it a helpful move? Or is there actually some real hypocrisy here? Because I did get some pushback on this, and I do want to address that. So it's all about the Big 12 preseason poll. Guys, I got to be honest here. I did notice this. I noticed when I got my confirmation email for credentials for Big 12 Media Days in Dallas, which is coming up a week from Tuesday. So we're getting pretty close there. It's the 8th and the 9th. I say Dallas, it's in Frisco at the Star. But I got my confirmation email and I was like, wait, hold up. I have not seen a preseason poll get sent to my inbox yet. And so I did stop and think. Like, I was like, that's weird. Usually, like, that comes basically at the same time and everybody puts that out there and then that you have it by the time that you go to Media Day. I thought, well, maybe they're just waiting. Maybe they're going to do something at Media Day, have you fill it out there. Brett McMurphy was the first I saw to tweet this, but I think multiple people now have. Just a couple of days ago that the Big 12 is getting rid of the preseason media poll. Now, why would they do that? The Big 10, I guess, also does not do one. I was unaware of that until I saw this. But the Big 12 ditching the preseason media poll, why? Well, there's no reason that I've seen like officially given here. But to me, it's just like, hey, we're not going to hand you something to use like from us. You can obviously on your own devices, you can create whatever propaganda it is that you want to use against our league, but we're not going to create it for you. What I mean by that is last year, college football playoff, at-large selections, BYU, subject of a lot of talk tonight, got virtually no consideration for an at-large spot, sat at 17th in the final poll. Meanwhile, Miami, which was perhaps in most people's minds the most deserving team that got left out, got all this consideration. BYU had a better strength of schedule, better strength of record. They had a much better win out of the two. I saw this stat this week on Twitter. Cam Ward of Miami, their quarterback, he had only 20 dropbacks the entire season against a ranked team. That came against Iowa State in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. So, look, Miami should absolutely not have objectively been right there on the cusp, and BYU left way out. But that's what happened. And I think a lot of the problem is the perception of the league was really jilted by the fact that you had the teams pick 13th and 16th in the league, dominating the headlines throughout the entirety of the season, which is what happened because the story of most of the season until the last month or so was BYU's run to 9-0. And even more so in the last month, they didn't lose to Kansas until November 16th. So BYU's unbeaten up through mid-November, and that was a team picked 13th in the Big 12 preseason poll. I think I had gone around saying 11th last week. I'd forgotten it was actually 13th. BYU was 13th. So they're 9-0. And then Arizona State wins the league after being picked dead last. That hurts the perception of the league when that happens, okay? When people are predisposed to thinking, hey, the Big 12 is not that good, and many out there would consider it for sure the fourth best league when it comes to football. If that's your preconceived notion and you think, hey, the Big 12 has nobody good at the top, they couldn't possibly compete with anybody from the SEC or Big 10 in the playoff, which we now know is obviously untrue because Arizona State was 1 4th and 13 stop away from beating Texas in the playoff. But that's what people think. If we're doing this SEC hypothetical game, that's what people think. And if they see that and then they see, oh, well, the team that was picked dead last in the Big 12 that we thought wasn't even talented enough to compete in that hack conference, they won the thing. Well, obviously it's a terrible league. It's not a good league. And that's going to drag down the reputation of everybody. I got pushback on like, oh, really? Well, BYU, this is such a ridiculous narrative from Big 12 fans. BYU was ranked in the top 10 and then they lost late in the year. Don't lose late in the year. Okay, but this is all about how much wiggle room you're afforded for your losses late in the year. You know who else lost late in the year? Miami lost late in the year, but they were still right there on the cusp of playoff contention with a worse resume objectively overall than BYU. And you know why? It was because people thought Miami was going to be good coming into the year. And Miami was a preseason, top 10, top 15 team. When you have that going into the season, that helps. You start at a higher place. Reputations get sealed into people's brains. Like, as humans, it is human nature. It is very difficult to get people to change their mind. What do people tell you when, you're like arguing with somebody over politics or something online? You're like, you're never going to change their mind. It's really difficult to get a human to change their mind, even in the face of evidence that would absolutely suggest that they need to change their mind. We don't change our minds. So if your preconceived notion early on is that BYU isn't any good, it's going to be really hard to change that. And then the second that they lose a game, well, of course, see, I told you they weren't any good. Of course they lost. You drop them like a rock, and you just confirm the bias that you had at the beginning of the year about what was burned into your brain. That's kind of how we work. And, this isn't even a new or novel concept. Like, how long have we been hearing people say, fans I've seen say this for a while, we should get rid of the preseason top 25s. Like, those create a lot of narratives that are really hard to ditch for certain teams. And it's kind of unfair, and it's really silly, and they can be really off. But the media, one, like, kind of wants to root for their prediction. And two, they again, the whole bias toward your preconceived notion there. And it's a lot easier if you're ranked in the preseason top 10 to make up for 2 losses during the regular season than it is if you're a team that starts outside of the top 25. It's way harder to climb that than it is to climb back up when you're falling from way up the mountain. So I didn't think that this would really be something that I would get a lot of pushback on, but there was at least some, when this has been a concept that I think has really been around for a while. People have talked about the AP top 25, coaches poll, all that. I would also say, part of that response is like, Iowa State and BYU were both ranked in the top 10 and blah, blah. Well, Iowa State was absolutely not in the playoff poll. They never got higher than 16th, which again is part of the deal here, like preconceived notions. Paul Feinbaum, a couple of years ago in 2021, after the Iowa State team with Brock Purdy and Breece Hall went 7-6, was like, I never want to hear about Iowa State ever again. People tell me they're good and then they're losing games here. I'm never believing that ever again. You've got a lot of people like that out there. And the Big 12 is just not in the business of handing them something here that they can use that is like rubber stamped from the Big 12. Look, the Big 12, the people that cover the Big 12, they put this damn thing out and they said these teams that aren't any good are now good enough to win their league. So how could the league possibly be good? I think it's a pretty smart move. The other pushback I got from Alec Bussey, who covers Iowa State, I mean, I thought this was a fair point. He said, hey, look, like, this is kind of ironic, right? Because the Big 12's whole marketing push about the league in football has been parody, parody, parody. Look how much parody the league has, and that's what makes it fun and entertaining, and that's why you should follow it. And so parody last year creates your last place team in the preseason poll actually winning the league. And now you're just like running away from that. You're making this move in reaction to that when it was supposed to be parody that was the driving force behind the league. And I would say, yeah, hey, that's fair if you want to point that out. I also would rather the Big 12 react to what happened and how it affected them and make a change, as opposed to just sticking to it because it is their preconceived notion that the best way to market the league is about the parody and how fun and exciting that is. I would rather them just admit, like, hey, yeah, that didn't really work in our favor. Let's change things and get better and improve and give us a better chance. I would much rather them do that than just be stuck in their ways. So my thoughts on that. I'm very, very much cool with this, even though I should be the guy that's sitting here like, man, this sucks. Give me a preseason poll. I need content. I need content. My former radio host, my former co-host in radio, reached out to me after he saw that and was like, hey, man, what would we have done back in July as a show without the Big 12 preseason poll to use as content for days? And I was like, boy, you're telling me that's a good question. The old radio days in Manhattan, Kansas, 2 hours to fill every single day in a town driven by college sports in July in the doldrums. I should be the guy that's clamoring for it, but hey, I can admit when it's better for the league, that's going to be better for everybody. So I'm cool with it. And, we can figure out our own polls. The Gambling Gauchos, shout out to my guys, the Gambling Gauchos on Twitter, who you should definitely be following if you are a Big 12 fan. Must follow in the league. They have taken it upon themselves to put together a Big 12 media/content creators poll. So I'm excited for that. I'm going to try and work in a fan poll that we can do as well. Like, I think there's just a lot here that can still be fun. We can still do it, but the Big 12 is not going to officially endorse something to provide narrative fuel to the fire of those who want to run down the league.